Hello, everyone, and good evening. I'm Kelly Nardi, Director of Communications for the City of Littleton. Thank you for joining us for our third telephone town hall. Tonight's topic is Envision Littleton. This is the city's update to our comprehensive and transportation master plans. For this evening's town hall, we are live at the Littleton Center on Cable Channel 8, as well as streaming on Facebook and at littletontownhall.org. We want to hear from you, so we are using this cool technology to connect with you no matter where you are. I'd like to explain the format of the town hall. In addition to those here in person, Littleton residents can join online at littletontownhall.org. If you are on a mobile phone but would like to watch the live video, press star 8 on your keypad now to receive a one-time text with a link to the stream. If you are streaming the event but would like to have the opportunity to ask a question live on the phone, you can call 888-480-3687. That number again is 888-480-3687. For those here in person, you can log into littletontownhall.org on your phone so you can participate in our polling questions. And look for links to a lot more information about Envision Littleton, including the draft copies of the two plans. Tonight we are providing information on Envision Littleton, and we want to know what you think. This is the 18-month community-driven, comprehensive, and transportation master plans that are scheduled for adoption by City Council in October. Envision Littleton will imagine the future of our city, and now that the draft plans are finished, we want to hear from you. For those on the phone again, please press star 3 if you have a question. A screener will collect your information, and you may have the opportunity to ask the question live. Again, that is star 3 on your keypad if you'd like to ask a question. If you're online, you can type your name and your question into the field below the video stream. And for those of you here in person, please write your question on the form we are providing, and Deputy City Manager Randy Young will collect that. Now let's get started. We have Littleton City Manager Mark Relf here to provide the background on why the city's comprehensive plan is in dire need of an update. There are several other staff here to listen and help answer your questions. For those of you on the phone, again, please remember to press star 3 if you have a question. If you're watching on Channel 8 and want to ask a question, or if you're listening on the phone and want to see the video, visit littletontownhall.org. Mark, let's get started. Thank you so much for being here.
All right, thanks, Kelly, and welcome to everybody watching and listening. Thank you for your participation. This is actually the third time we've used this technology. For the other two are completely different kinds of topics, but actually I find this kind of fun and rather exciting. I'd like to introduce our experts who are here to ensure that you get the most and accurate answers to your questions. They are Jennifer Henninger, our Community Development Director, Keith Reister, our Public Works Director, Kathleen Osher, she's our Manager of Innovation and Performance Excellence. We're also anticipating to have our mayor and several council members here this evening to listen to what you have to say. So let's start with why we are doing this. A comprehensive plan provides a city with a framework to clearly define our shared values and vision and unify around a set of goals and priorities for the future of our city. Littleton's comprehensive plan hasn't been updated since 1987. Let's take a moment and think about that. The city's population has grown from 29,000 to 49,000, an increase of almost 20,000 people. There was no light rail, there was no Aspen Grove or Hudson Gardens, no historic preservation program for our beautiful downtown, and that was even before South Platte Park had a name. And imagine that there are no personal computers or smartphones 32 years ago. Our new comprehensive plan addresses the values and vision of the city in areas such as housing and neighborhoods, transportation, infrastructure and services, economy and tax bases, recreation, heritage and tourism, the environment, and special areas and design. We are now in the third phase of this process with the release of the draft comprehensive and transportation master plans. We want you to review them and tell us what you think. That's the reason for this telephone town hall this evening. We want to hear from you. If you haven't had a chance to look at them yet, we'll be taking public comment until Monday, September 16th. We have an online comment form and survey and a guide to reviewing the documents. Or you can email Kathleen here at kosher@littletongov.org.
All right. Thank you so much. For those of you on the phone, please remember to press *3 if you have a question, and we have a few coming in, so that's great. We look forward to getting to those. If you're watching on Channel 8, and we've got one of those as well, and you want to ask a question, or if you're listening on the phone and want to see the video, visit littletontownhall.org. Now I'd like to ask Kathleen to speak about the engagement process that we've been working on since last year to make sure that we hear from as many citizens as possible to tell us what they love about Littleton and what they'd like to see for the future. Kathleen?
Thanks, Kelly. It's no denying it that if you want to do a big process like this, the best thing that you can do is have incredible input. And what I want to really recognize is the amazing passion that we found in the community, the incredible love for this place that came through with every engagement event that we scheduled, as well as all of the input that we received. I think in the end, what I found out is that we have way more in common than sets us apart. And that's the combination of 8,000 in-person conversations, over 64,000 electronic communications. The emphasis throughout this entire process has really been on small groups, listening sessions, interviews. And last year, we hosted a lot of pop-up events to really increase the awareness and encourage everyone to share their ideas for the future. We're looking to renew those and create partnerships, but also to really build lasting relationships. This year, that meant building on that input that we got from 2018. We doubled the amount of presentations and those discussions. We grew our email list so that we had an amazing following with actually a 50% open rate, which is incredible. We added things this year like a street fair to really dig in on the plans, as well as this telephone town hall and a 4-part speaker series. All of those series events are available online if you wanted to tune in and take a look for the first 3, and there is one remaining that I'd love to have everyone join us. So on Thursday, September 12th, we'll have the amazing and inspiring Peter Kajiyama. He's an author of a book called For the Love of Cities, and he'll really focus on each of our roles as a co-creator here for the future of the city of Littleton. This is a free event, and it will be hosted at the Arapahoe Community College in the Summit Room, but it does require advanced registration. And so that opportunity to register is at envisionlittleton.org, our dedicated website.
All right. Next up, we have Jennifer. Jennifer, you want to talk to us about what a comp plan is and why we need one?
Yes. So as Kathleen stated, we have spent quite a bit of time with the community identifying our vision and guiding principles. And truly, vision and guiding principles are the heart and soul of a comprehensive plan, or a comp plan, as planners like to call it. So what is a comp plan? A comp plan is a roadmap to guide decisions about the community's future development over the next 20 years. And also to make sure that decisions are consistent with what we have heard over these last 18 months. of what Littleton's community vision, values, and goals are. A comp plan is also the basis for regulatory actions in the future. The comp plan will serve as a foundation for such things as zoning updates, subdivision regulation updates, development review, how we do development review, and other community development decisions such as, should we go for a grant? Should we go for some grants? Yes. A comprehensive plan is also a communication tool. It's a communication tool to citizens, to developers, to council, and others of what the community is willing to support in terms of development and investment. And it also provides guidance for capital improvement needs, transportation needs, as well as local initiatives such as water protection, recreation, open space acquisition, and housing. And finally, the comprehensive plan will help us on a regional level to set the stage for the things that we want to be involved in and let the region know who Littleton is and what we want in the future. As I stated in the beginning here, the heart and soul of any good comprehensive plan is the community's vision with its guiding principles. And we have a quick little video that explains how we arrived at Littleton's vision and guiding principles.
All right, while Tyler works on that video, let's go ahead and have our Public Works Director, okay. Jennifer, do you want to finish up with any comments, and then we'll see if we can get that video in a minute?
Sure. So just summarizing the vision and what we heard from the community, there was definitely an emphasis on the established neighborhoods and the character of that and being able to maintain that and protecting our natural, cherished setting and reinvestment in the community as a high priority. Also meeting local expectations for high quality development in the future. Addressing accessibility and the city's financial sustainability in the future.
I think Tyler's still working on that. Oh, it is? All right, Tyler, let's roll the video.
We asked for your vision for the city of Littleton.
It's a very beautiful place to live in.
No parking meters downtown. Keep it that way.
Because we've lived here our whole lives. We love Littleton. It's a great city.
We heard you. And here's what we learned.
One of the things that we understood early on with Envision Littleton is that in many ways we as a community are held to a higher standard. There were incredible civic leaders and founders of this city that we really had to build on their shoulders. They've done some amazing heavy lifting through the years to create a beautiful and iconic city. And so it's really an understanding that Littleton is already a great place. How do we take advantage of keeping it?
One thing that has really struck me during our time here in Littleton is really how passionate the people that live here are about their city. They may not always agree on the why or the how, but that community feeling of we all are here for Littleton and we all believe in the future of Littleton really came through to me.
Small town, but it's an exciting place to live, great people.
It's just such a friendly community, and that there's a lot of people who are close to each other, and all of the businesses are so local.
Working through this vision process, we've come to a short list of frankly, some key words that we try to focus both from the elected official to your residents on, that capture what Littleton's about, what it hopes to be in the future. And it's words like being an active community, which gets to things like health and fitness. Also a very eventful city where you can gather, go to concerts, go to different events in the community. And then there's words like being an anchored place, an authentic place. That really came through in our conversations, that Littleton is real. It's not a master plan community that was built over a period of years. It was built over many decades.
I like the city of Littleton because it's a small city that has a lot to offer.
And I think they do a great job of communication and getting the community involved, and lots of activities and events, and they just make it a fun place to be.
As we went through the process of creating a vision and set of guiding principles, obviously the most important thing we can do is get great input. So the fact that we could have almost 3,000 conversations, that we could have 870 survey responses, that we could be visible in over 50,000 partner newsletter email addresses, that were showing up in people's inboxes in their email, that we could have that kind of awareness was super important to building the long-term relationship. But the other commitment that we as a city wanted to make is that it doesn't just stop with getting that input. What we want to do is take the plan back out when it's still in draft to say, did we get it right? So these 5 guiding principles allow us to use them almost like a filtration system. And the best analogy, as we went out and talked to the community, that became very clear is, could we treat these 5 lenses like lenses of a camera and think about them in that sense of filtering, so that when we really talk about how decisions and projects deliver on each of those 5 lenses, that we understand we as a community can stay clear and we can be in focus.
For the latest updates, please visit envisionlittleton.org.
So a large part of a comprehensive plan is a focus on transportation. So we have Public Works Director Keith Reister here, and I'd like to introduce him to talk about the Transportation Master Plan.
Thanks, Jen. Here, we've never had a transportation plan here in the city of Littleton, so it's a really exciting time for us to be developing that as part of the comprehensive plan. It's really a roadmap for us to figure out where we need to go to have folks be able to move about our community, have great mobility and great accessibility. That's really what we're trying to accomplish. And without planning for that, you're never going to be able to fund it, you're never going to be able to go out and chase grants for it, and you're not going to be able to maintain the quality of life you have. Because really, at the end of the day, the transportation system is here to enable a quality of life. Businesses to thrive, people to live in the community, to get to active recreation, have jobs they want to be a part of, and just enjoy the community they live in. And so some of the things that we are laying out in the transportation plan, what are our future needs? Where's the capacity? Where do we have bottlenecks today, and how do we move forward? How do all of our modes interact? Bicycle, pedestrian, transit, car, whatever happens in the future. Because this is a 20-year planning horizon, so a lot could change in those 20 years. So we have to have an adaptable, flexible plan as well. One of the big things for us is also accessibility. We want everybody in our community to be able to get access to the community, regardless of their mode of transportation or their level of mobility or their financial wherewithal to do so. So all those things are all important. One of the other things that's really a big part of this for us as well is our ability to partner throughout the region, in the state, and with the federal government to bring dollars here to tackle our problems. One of the things we talk about, a lot of people get to drive through Mineral and Santa Fe frequently, and I certainly know that because they call me and email me about it. Hopefully not when they're stuck in traffic. And one of the things that they say is, go out there and build a grade separated interchange. That's $90 million. We're going to need partners from around the region to do that, from the state and from the federal government. And so this document helps us show where we're going, how we're going to get there. How do we build in things like bus rapid transit to connect everything that we have to support that quality of life we want? I was just looking before I came in here, and when we updated the comp plan last time, in Arapahoe, Douglas, and Jefferson Jefferson County, the population was 890,000 people. The estimate today by the state demographer is 1.6 million in those 3 counties. That's a 75% growth. And, if you figure, 2 cars for every one of those households, that's a lot of vehicles and a lot of transportation moving around. And so planning for that and planning for that future growth that we're going to see around us as well as in our community is really important to, building that community we want in the future and sustaining the things that are important to us and what we cherish about this community.
We've got a number of questions lined up, and we're going to get to them in just a minute, but we want to ask a poll question to get things rolling. So this is our first poll question of the evening. As of 2015, Littleton had around 30,000 jobs in the city. How many of those jobs were held by people who live outside of Littleton city limits? On your phone, using your keypad, press 1 if you think 26% of jobs were held by people outside of Littleton. Press 2 if you think that number is 40%. Press 3 if you think that number is 82%. Or press 4 if you think 92% of Littleton's jobs are held by people who don't live in Littleton. So go ahead and do that now. And let's take a look at the numbers. And it looks like most of you think that 40% of the jobs come from outside of the city. The correct answer is actually number 4, because 28,000 of the 30,000 jobs in the city are held by people who don't live here. I mean, that's a pretty remarkable number. Well, let's get to some viewer questions. We're going to go to Mitchell on the phone. Mitchell, would you like to go ahead and ask your question?
Hello. I'm a 27-year-plus Littleton resident, and I know this is a minor or smaller detail, but on the economic development front, I'm really concerned right now that I've seen a really great lessening of sit-down restaurants and available department store style shopping, and I wonder if the city plan addresses that currently and into the future.
All right, great question.
All right. Actually, it is a good question. I think I'm a big advocate of this process, going from vision to comprehensive plan to our code update. One of the elements that we want to kind of flesh out here in more detail over time is kind of an economic development strategy. I think right now that's largely absent here for us. And so as we kind of take the values here of our citizens and we kind of look at the opportunities for growth, we want to be very specific here and through this process, through our comprehensive plan and our zoning code, to encourage development where we think it is appropriate, where it does link with transportation, where it kind of makes sense for all of that. And we just haven't done that in the past. The piece that this caller's question then is, how do we kind of encourage very specific kinds of development? And quite honestly, some of the shopping and the restaurants is a theme that we continue to hear. And I think that after we adopt the comp plan, the council is going to have a lot more conversation about a very formal economic development strategy that links these kinds of wishes and desires with the land use, and what is it that the city is actually going to invest in order to kind of ultimately meet the values and the wishes here of our citizens.
And I just remind you to press *3 on your phone if you have a question that you would like to ask. We do have a question from someone in our audience here. It's kind of a long question, so I'll try to summarize. This person is asking, what's the rush? Why not extend the comprehensive plan for one more public input cycle, have more neighborhood meetings, plus more neighborhood input on the comprehensive plan? Would somebody like to try that one?
Sure. Actually, there is no rush. I think that we have been evaluating our process over the last 18 months, making sure that we believe that we're listening to people and that people have had an opportunity to comment on this. Clearly, we have a city council, and kudos to them, who believe strongly in this particular process. I think it's their hope that through this particular cycle of the council, they have an opportunity to kind of act on that. And currently, we are scheduled for Planning Commission review, recommendation here in October, and then shortly thereafter, our city council would act on that. I believe personally, based on what I've seen here in the last several months, that we are getting the kinds of interactions that we had hoped for. In fact, this really does exceed my expectations. I've been involved in processes like this in other cities. I have to say the amount of feedback that we have received is quite stunning. And so personally, I am very pleased. The other thing, too, I would comment on this is that we are not going to wait another 30 some odd years to do an update to our comprehensive plan and master plan. One of the things that the council recognizes is that the adoption of this is the first step in us actually making sure that over time we have a system, a process where we can evaluate change that occurs. And I've recommended that we look to kind of a 5 to 6 year cycle to make sure that we are in touch with the vision and that we do formally review and update the comprehensive plan and the transportation master plan. And I think, too, there's also going to be a pretty strong opportunity during those updates for us to engage again with our community to make sure that we are listening, that we are in touch. And I don't doubt that we will also have opportunity here to update the comprehensive plan, transportation master plan, maybe even sooner than that, depending on whatever topics that may influence these kinds of things. Our Public Works Director, Keith Reister, commented on bus rapid transit. This is a concept now that's been around in our metro area, but RTD is looking at that pretty seriously in a corridor like Broadway. I believe that has pretty significant impacts for us as a community for access, for transportation, for land use decisions. And so that's a piece that I know will kind of unfold here in the next couple of years and probably require an update to our plans.
Online, we have a question from Stephanie. Stephanie wants to know, how are you all planning to address the extremely limited parking that seems to only be getting worse? And I assume Stephanie is asking about downtown Littleton. Just a guess.
Well, we certainly heard in the video, no parking meters. I think that's what we heard in the video when we were looking earlier. One of the things that is in the transportation plan is we also identify other areas where we're going to need to have specific plans that address targeted areas of the city. Things like a Bellevue corridor, Broadway, Mineral Station area. One of those is downtown, and I think a lot of times in the past, folks have talked about downtown as we need more parking, let's do a parking study. At the end of the day, that's part of what we need to look at. We need to look at downtown mobility. How do all the roads and the streets and the modes, light rail, pedestrian, bike, all that fit together? And it needs to extend out beyond what a lot of people just think is the traditional downtown. It's got to go a ways up Littleton Boulevard. It's got to stretch to the Mary Carter Greenway. It's got to stretch past Arapahoe County Community College. And those are critical components because they all tie and feed into that. And planning for that is important. How do you work on that? A lot of people say go build a parking garage at $25,000 a space. They get really expensive really quickly. So those are the kind of things as we work to a downtown mobility plan is one of the derivatives we'll see out of the transportation plan. And I'm actually really excited about that. It's going to be a lot of fun to engage with the community downtown and figure out how do we support the direction of downtown in the future? How do we keep it economically vibrant and vibrant for people to come and go down there and really, it's a hallmark of Littleton, and how do we preserve and grow and enhance that?
You might as well hold on to the microphone, Keith, because our next question, also submitted online, is from Sasha. And I remind our listeners on the phone to press *3 anytime if you want to get in the queue to ask a question. Sasha's question is, are there planned improvements to Santa Fe? It is so congested.
you have an amazing foresight. So I actually have some exciting news on that. One of the things that we've really focused on over the last couple of years is Santa Fe, first of all, is an expressway in CDOT's system. And so it's really their road that we participate in, and that goes north and south of us as well. In fact, Santa Fe, as US 85, precedes the interstate system. It's the old Can-Am highway. What we've done on that front is we've partnered with all of the jurisdictions from basically 470 to Alameda and South Denver along Santa Fe to come up with what does the future of this corridor look like. Kind of like we're doing with the comp plan and transportation plan, we're going to do that just for Santa Fe. A planning and environmental linkages study will allow the communities along there and all the residents and businesses to engage and say, what does the future of this roadway look like? How do we preserve how it interacts with our community? And how do we move traffic through there in all modes? For example, one of the things we recognize here, as well as north of us, is Santa Fe is a divider between the river and the rest of the community. And we really need to be able to bridge that gap to have east-west connectivity as an example. The other part of that is along the corridor, it will allow us to identify the highest priority projects with the big impacts. And that allows us to, as a region, chase and pursue funds that will help us overcome some of those challenges. At Mineral and Santa Fe specifically, we've been able to acquire $10 million in grant funding in the last year that's going to allow us to make some interim improvements there, which should add about 60% capacity, which is going to be a step on the way to that $90 million grade separating interchange that will eventually be there.
Our next question comes from Karen. Does the city planning include building bike lanes and sidewalks for increased commuting along Santa Fe and other major roads? Please note, e-bikes are already having a noticeable increase in cycling, a good thing.
Well, I'll take that one again, I guess. As a big component of the Transportation Master Plan, in the implementation section, we really look at 5 main buckets: active transportation, which is kind of what you referred to, transit, auto, and then accessibility, ADA kind of things. And then the last one is regionally significant projects. And within the Transportation Master Plan, a sub-plan of that is an update to the bike and pedestrian plan. Are we going to put bike lanes on every street in the city? No. Are we going to try to create a network that's accessible to everyone? So if you're a really experienced rider, you can get around. But also if you're a family with young children, you can still access and get around as well. One of the things too that's a real focus for us is across the city, we have over 4,000 locations that are not ADA, Americans with Disability Act, compliant and accessible. And so one of our targets as we work through a plan like this is to identify our priorities in that. And one of the things that's in there is, for example, Littleton has a whole bunch of sidewalks that are attached right to the road, and they're only 3 feet wide. The general standard for that today is 5 feet and detached from the road, if you can do that, to make it safer, a better feeling, and add mobility. So those are the things that are at the top of our list, to be able to integrate all of the modes so people can get to and from things. How do you get to the park in your neighborhood, or how do you get to shopping and those kind of things, and allowing people to do that in different modes.
And I think you might have touched on this, but Jonathan wants to know, what is your plan for cyclists, bike lanes, and shared lanes?
Well, there's an existing bike and pedestrian plan here in Littleton that was crafted in 2011. So one of the recommendations out of the transportation plan will be to update that. That really will have a little more definition to specific projects and those kind of things along time. Over the last couple of years, we've actually added a number of shared lanes. You see the Sharrows, for example, on Prince. The combined lanes, we've added a number of bike lanes as we've put new surfaces on streets, as we've restriped them to allow more cycle activity. And then part of that, as I mentioned earlier, is we have an ongoing study with the South Platte Working Group to really address east-west connectivity across Santa Fe from all of our great assets along the river to the rest of the community.
I think we're going to go to another poll question since we're talking about transportation. Our second poll question is, how many passenger trips were there on the omnibus and shopping cart buses combined in 2018? If you think there were 2,000 trips last year, press 1. If you think there were 12,000 rides last year, press 2. If you think that number is 19,000, press 3. And if you think there were 22,000 trips, press 4. Everyone cast your vote now. We'll give it a minute. And as we wait for you to vote, I want to remind you to press star 3 if you're on the phone, if you have a question you'd like to ask of our panel. All right, it looks like the majority of you think that the correct answer is 3 the correct answer is 3, and that is right. There were more than 19,300 passenger trips on these city-funded buses that meet the mobility needs of people with disabilities and those over the age of 65. So good job out there. You guys know what you're doing. I think we're going to shift a little bit to land use. I think we've spent a little bit of time on transportation. How will the comp plan change zoning in the city?
The comprehensive plan will really, as I stated before, provide a roadmap towards those future zoning regulations. It establishes the character. As we stated, the comprehensive plan is unique and that it really focuses on character. So any zoning updates that we do will, again, look back to the comprehensive plan and look at the goals and the policies and the action steps that have been set forward in the comp plan to determine what future zoning will look like in the city.
Right. And we don't have a lot of space in Littleton to build new things. We are landlocked. How do we maintain what we have?
Again, I think going back to the character that we have established through this process and what we have heard from the citizens. So future redevelopment, development will be emphasized by the comprehensive plan and the character that we've established.
I'm sorry, Kelly, let me add to that. You know, I think the one piece I would like to add is that we are taking a pretty unique approach here when we talk about developing a comprehensive plan. So when Jennifer talks about an effort here to identify the character of a neighborhood, we hired a firm that really specializes in this concept. And so we're trying to clearly understand what makes our neighborhoods unique. What is that character? And so the next step that when we go into the the zoning code, then the intent is to try to come up with a series of zoning regulations that reflect and try to a large extent, try to maintain a lot of that character that makes us unique. We have a lot of distinct neighborhoods across the city, and I think that we're trying to find a way that, and we're hearing from citizens, quite honestly, where that is a real important value for us. And so, again, that's just a detail that may somehow sound subtle, but quite honestly, in my opinion, it is a pretty significant issue.
Kelly, I could just add a little bit more on this idea of character. I think it's really best understood by if you had a pie in front of you, and there are 3 things that you can divvy the pie up into. You can say there's some building, there's some pavement, there's some green space. When you think about the vast majority of the city of Littleton, that pie gets divided up into 3 equal parts. So almost the exact distribution of building, pavement, and green space. And that's kind of that suburban character. And the process that Candid Keast really brings us is then you take that pie and sort of redistribute those slices based on where you are. So if you think about that suburban character where all the pieces are the same size, then think about something like downtown where the emphasis is really on the building. Yes, there is still pavement because most people are connecting with our downtown by parking, and there's also that green space, which looks a lot like landscaping and treescaping. And so that really is emphasized in the plan. And as people have a chance to take a look at that draft that's online at envisionlittleton.org, each of those character types get defined by that sort of pie and the distribution of those 3 things. So it really does create a visual element for folks to kind of understand what is that character, how does that fit with what I already experience, where I'm spending time here in Littleton, and then how does that really put in place what happens into the future over the next 20 years.
And what other changes might happen to downtown as a result of the comp plan?
as Keith mentioned, one of the most important parts of looking at downtown into the future is really this idea of a mobility plan. That process, we sort of anticipate there may be elements we might be able to start in 2020. We're really looking at the greatest impact of most of the comprehensive plan, transportation master plan in 2021 and beyond. But it is really important to understand the historic aspects of downtown. We also see a great opportunity to really engage the community of downtown businesses as well as new downtown residents and find those new relationships, those new champions, and have a much more robust conversation that kind of includes that mobility piece, plus also the things that are happening on the ground. I think the other component that Jennifer talked about with zoning and land use code, there are some contradictions that we'll need to really remedy in terms of future steps that we take. And a lot of that work will look at the adoption of the comprehensive plan late this year, and then look at starting to tackle where we can kind of get a better sense of how zoning and code can help deliver on both that policy aspect of the comprehensive plan, but also the goals that council will have adopted. And so that process looks like a big community conversation in 2020.
Does Littleton have a housing crisis? And if so, does the comprehensive plan address it?
So I believe in 2017, we did in 2017 and 2018, we did undertake a housing study, and many of the recommendations of that housing study have been integrated into the comprehensive plan. I think Denver-wide, there is a housing situation in terms of affordability and attainability, and it is definitely something that City Council is keenly aware of. We have a great partnership with South Metro Housing Options, and that relationship and work with them is definitely stressed in the comprehensive plan as well.
Yeah, let me just kind of add to that. I think it's an interesting question because I saw an article here this week where we saw in the Business Journal the most expensive residential property sold here per square foot was here in Littleton. And so I see that as another sign that we do have a challenge here. And over the last couple of years, I've seen reports where Littleton is like number 2, number 3 in the price for a 2-bedroom rental apartment. You know, our community pays a price for that. That is a problem. That is a crisis. So as young families want to take access or, you know, accessibility here in our community, want to live here, want to use our school systems, to be able to kind of live in the city and find reasonable property is a challenge. And it's not, obviously not just a challenge here in Littleton, but it is throughout the whole metro area, perhaps nationally. I think for us, we don't have a strategy. And I think this is an opportunity for us. As Jennifer is kind of pointing out, the comp plan is kind of the first opportunity to kind of highlight this issue. I think, too, we had in the speaker series, Brett Keast with Kenda Keast was here talking about how, and I love this analogy because he talked in terms of a comprehensive plan as being a mobile, where you got pieces kind of hanging off this mobile. And for us, we've just started that. We're having an update to our comprehensive plan. We're going to have our transportation master plan. We're going to have an economic analysis here of both those issues, in essence trying to answer the question, can we afford this? But I also believe that housing is going to be one of those that will add to the mobile, that will play out this conversation here next year and into the future, trying to develop a strategy about how do these all connect? How do we provide the opportunity for young families to move into our community to access the kinds of things that people cherish here? Certainly our school district, there's a lot to appreciate about them here in our region.
And I want to remind everyone that if you're on the phone, you can press *3 anytime if you'd like to ask a question, or you can type the question below the streaming player if you're online. The next question I want to go to is from someone in our audience here in the Littleton Center. A big buzzword today is climate change. Many people feel if we don't address this, we will not have a city to live in. What is Littleton doing to address this? Is there any thought to planting more trees and creating more open space, making plug-ins available for electronic vehicles, and finding incentives for carpooling or anything else?
I'll be happy to take that one. Having worked in this business for a number of years, sustainability and community resiliency is really a critical component of anything that we do. On the resiliency side, it's preparing for disaster so that your community does well in a disaster and rebounds quickly. On the sustainability side, that is something that has not really ever been in the planning here in Littleton, or at least called out from that perspective. From an operational level, we certainly take a look at that each and every day. We are working with partners to bring things like additional electric vehicle plug-ins to the city. We work with Dr. Cog on their regional mobility for rideshare and carpooling and those kind of things. And we try and bring that to the community through our partners. On the green space side of things, we really don't have a lot of space left to buy within our boundaries, as we were mentioning on the economic development side. So we're a little limited there. One of the interesting things that we identified during the course of the comp plan is we've got about 3 times more acreage per citizen in this community than almost all of our peers that's dedicated to open space. We have a really unique feature with South Platte Park that provides that all the way through our community. And those kind of things. So from a sustainability standpoint, that's important. On the operational side, we work at it every day, and also in our operations, we look at that every day. For example, in our grounds and landscaping area, we've basically moved to non-chemical pesticides and herbicides a couple of years ago to just support our efforts on this particular area.
And I would just add, from the community conversations that we've had over the last 18 months, it's interesting sometimes the vocabulary is different, right? So we haven't heard a lot about sustainability or even environmental, but it is a clear priority for our residents, businesses, and people that love to spend time here. It is something that is inherent in their Littleton experience, both that combination of open space, the incredible dedication to clean water, clean air. And so all of those things really come out in their essence. And so it's how do we capture those and then pull those through, particularly with the comprehensive plan, to translate into direct goals, and then a series of policy statements that then become the framework and vehicle for our policymakers and elected officials to really kind of follow through and deliver on that promise of why people love this place so much.
Well, panel, as we learned from our first telephone town hall, Littleton residents are very interested in Santa Fe and Mineral. So, a couple of questions from Lisa. Doesn't a grade-separated interchange at Santa Fe and Mineral run counter to the goal of improving east-west connectivity?
Well, that's an interesting question. If you have interest in a little more detail on this, we've done a fair amount of design and outreach down in this area already, and we have a section on our website dedicated specifically to this, which shows some concept designs. One of the things in terms of a grade-separated interchange, having been involved in a number of these projects, is the goal overall is to move primarily vehicles through the intersection far more quickly. What we have right now with a non-grade separated is we lose a lot of time people turning left. That's the easiest way to put it. And that particular interchange area was designed for probably 25,000 cars a day, and it's looking at about 90,000 a day. So we've got some real challenges there, the railroad, the river, grade, all those kind of things. But the designs that we've looked at for the 2 primary grade separating interchange would really allow traffic to move in both directions a lot more efficiently so that folks don't get that short, if you're in school, it'd be like being in detention when you sit there at the afternoon peak in your car for a few light cycles.
Yeah, let me add too, I think, to what Keith is saying. I think the caller makes a really interesting point here, or question. And I think it's, as we've kind of heard through our community conversations and certainly in the development of the Transportation Master Plan, I think it is an opportunity for us to recognize that we no longer want Santa Fe to be a barrier. We are looking for ways not only to be efficient with the movement of traffic, but also we're looking for all the modes. And Keith has hit on that this evening here a couple of times, but we are really focused on trying to find ways to connect pedestrians and bicyclists across this corridor. This study that Keith talked about here with CDOT and all of our partners along Santa Fe is a pretty extensive, 2.5-year process, Keith, where we're going to be engaging our community and all the communities through this corridor, trying to answer that question about what is the footprint? What does this ultimately function and look like? And for us, we're not interested in just moving cars. We want to make sure that we have the opportunity to look for improvements that really break down that barrier, that make it a lot easier for pedestrians and bicyclists to move across Santa Fe and towards things like the river. In fact, our council here recognized that we need to spend some time in this river corridor adjacent to Santa Fe and do some additional planning here so that we are prepared to submit this kinds of information here to CDOT through this process so that the ultimate design of Santa Fe reflects these kinds of things.
We have a lot of questions coming in, so this is really great. Thank you all. We're going to go to a caller on the phone, Bonnie, who lives on Curtis Street. Bonnie, what is your question? Are you there?
I have a question or a comment. Hello?
Please ask your question.
It's a comment. The people should be notified that own houses and that live in Littleton about the high density growth that is occurring here. They're the ones that, the older people that have the houses that live in Littleton, they do not use the internet. They do not use the phone for these meetings. They're the ones that should be looked at and listened to. That's my comment.
Thank you. I think her question is about how do we notify residents when there's a development adjacent to where they live?
Yeah, and I'll talk just briefly about the Envision process and our emphasis. For example, this event and others were included in a postcard that was sent to every mailing address here in the city. So we make every attempt. Is there always room to grow in terms of how we're engaging our community? Absolutely. And we welcome any and all ideas. Envisionlittleton.org is our website. It's not always a perfect tool to have a website as the major gathering place of all of these documents, but it is an opportunity for people to kind of dig into those plans and offer those comments. So if you have suggestions, we'd love to hear them. We've had some incredible members of our community that have hosted living room sessions, and we've brought dinner and had a conversation over dinner with folks. We've also had living room sessions with people. There have been others that have gathered 40 people that we can have just a dialogue with. So any and all suggestions are greatly welcomed. But I think that there are a number of tools that our community development department has created, particularly in the last couple of years, that have been great reference points for folks.
Right. So in regards to her question about new development that's occurring, so we do send out notices that everybody should be getting in the mail, properties within 300 feet, I believe. And also we do have the plan in the library, a draft of the plan in the library. So if you'd like to see a hard copy of that, you can go to the library, and we do have some here at City Hall. Those are the suggestions I would give. But if right, that's online as well. So if you don't have a computer, please come in here and we'd be happy to show you what's going on. And we're open to other suggestions. So Bonnie, if you have any other suggestions, let us know.
All right, we're going to go to another phone caller. This is Jackie, and I think Jackie lives in the Kettering neighborhood. Is that right, Jackie?
I believe in the Kessler neighborhood on the west side of Littleton. Hello?
Jackie, go ahead.
Yes. Yes, I live over on the west side of Littleton, and we're talking about the culture of the city and the vision of the city. We have that property at Bellevue and Federal that has been an eyesore. What can we do about it? The one where the city was going to give
Square, yeah.
The Bellevue and Federal property.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a difficult piece of property here, and I think it's, for any city, it's kind of a challenge trying to balance private property rights versus kind of the regulations of a city. And so we have been trying to engage this property owner in some kind of project. In fact, we have an urban renewal area, the only one left in our city, with the hope of trying to spark something that's kind of positive. And I have to admit, we've struggled deeply with this particular piece of property. And I'm not sure what the outcome will be in the short term. Eventually, something will have to happen here. I'm confident of that. But I think in the meantime, while we may have an open door trying to understand what they may want to pursue, I think we're also making sure we're trying to keep it clean, the weeds cut, those kind of basic things. So I appreciate the residents in that area and their frustration with that property. Believe me, I myself and council as well has been frustrated at times. But again, we're trying to create some kind of a positive atmosphere condition here for the owner of that property to kind of step up and do something here that's good for our community.
We have a question online from Steve who says, I have lived in Littleton since 1980 and now reside by Heritage High School, which is the focus of my concerns as follows. 1, please confirm there is no planning for future schools to be plunked down in residential neighborhoods that don't have the roads and transportation, I think.
I think Steve's visited with me before on this particular topic. One of the things that I would say that more than likely there's not going to be a lot more schools built in this community, certainly what we've seen from Littleton Public Schools. One of the challenges we have in the transportation and traffic business is that in a community like Littleton, most of the schools were built as neighborhood schools. And so what's happening today is they're not neighborhood schools. Almost every school in Littleton Public Schools is a magnet school in essence. You have a lot of folks even from outside the district here. So what that does on the transportation side is in the AM and PM, you basically have traffic spasms, is the way that I like to put it. And it's a challenge for us. And so one of the ways that we engage on that is we certainly work with the school district. We have a great working relationship with them to do our best. We work with each individual school to help with traffic and transportation. And we also support alternative modes like Safe Route to School so that kids can get out there and walk and bike. And that's really kind of gone away. And then one of our goals is to really bring that back into our community here locally.
All right. We have several hundred people on the phone, and I just want to remind you to press *3 if you have a question and keep the online comments coming. We're going to go to another poll question. This is our third of the night. We're going to ask 4 of these questions. As we all know, growth is a major topic, and it's a key component to the comprehensive plan. We want to know how much you know about growth in Littleton. In which decade did Littleton experience the most growth? If you think this decade is the right answer, press 1. If you think the most growth occurred in the 1950s, press 2. If you think growth was greatest in the 1970s, press 3. And if you think the largest amount of growth took place in the 1990s, press 4. Go ahead and cast your votes now. Let's take a look. It looks like the majority of you think the most growth occurred in the 1970s. Actually, the correct answer is 2. The decade of the 1950s was when Littleton's population quadrupled from 3,300 people to more than 13,000. So let's go to a couple of questions that have been submitted online. Back to Santa Fe and Mineral from Chris. Chris says, traffic is impossible on east and westbound Mineral. Development on Santa Fe and Mineral will surely affect that. Please don't put in anything high density, and please don't put in a flyover there.
Chris
Well, yes, the parcel on the southwest corner there's actually 2 parcels, is the last large parcel in the city, and currently the 2 parcels have development review applications into the city. so we can see what's down there, and that's part of the development review process. You can review all of that information. You know, in the short term, one of the things that we're certainly looking at as part of this interim project is to add basically loop roads within that development area as well as up towards the RTD station, which will allow us to move traffic through there much more efficiently, especially the east-west movements there, so that we can do that. So that's kind of the situation there. And we always, one of the things that's a critical component of development review is you can't build something without bringing a traffic study to us. You have to be able to identify the impact of your development on the traffic to the city. And there's impact fees that get charged for that, and we bring those forward to transportation improvements. And so every development, regardless of what goes down there, has to be able to show how much traffic they're contributing and how they're dealing with that so that it doesn't add additional burden to the city and the citizens.
You know, one piece I might add to that, I think what I'm hearing is a little bit of a concern about the flyover itself and perhaps the aesthetics of what that might look like in that area. And we've certainly heard pretty clearly from the community that, you know, this is a very scenic corridor that we've got there. Again, we're trying to balance private property rights against public right-of-way, and so how do we kind of manage all that? But yeah, I think some of the design that Public Works has been looking at and probably will certainly through the CDOT PEL process, we're going to talk about that. I think we're not interested in creating some kind of grade separated structure that sticks way up in the air. We obviously want something that's going to fit in with a character, and that's going to be hard. That's probably one of the reasons why it's $90 million is trying to figure a solution that we somehow get underneath the railroad, maybe minerals somehow depressed, and we minimize the height of Santa Fe, but those are the kinds of design issues that Public Works and CDOT are going to wrestle with.
And just for our viewers who do not know what a PEL is, would you like to explain that?
Yes. It is called a Planning and Environmental Linkages Study. And what that does is it's a federal process that allows communities to take a look at a transportation corridor, but everything that affects it. The land use, the economic development, the residential, and how all those fit together to support the corridor. And one of the, you know, kind of we've expressed here in our discussion, one of the important parts of the comprehensive plan and the transportation plan and some of the land use discussions is we want to be able to engage on this PEL discussion with CDOT and our peer communities to say, this is what Littleton's community character is, and this is what's important to us in this corridor. So like, you know, we were just talking about the view shed with a giant structure down there. You know, it's those kind of things that we want to be able to tell them, hey, east-west connectivity is really important. It's really important for us to be able to have great views and to be able to have great opportunities for business as well as residential down there. And this is a great time for that, so we can really emphasize that with our partners. And the other part is citizens and community members have a huge role in the PEL process. There's an extensive public engagement process that CDOT will have in partnership with all of us communities along the way, and we're going to be looking forward to everybody coming out and being a participant in that.
And Jim, I think you had a similar question about Santa Fe and minerals, so I hope that answers your question. And thank you for asking. And if it didn't, send us another one. Let's talk about apartments. We all see apartments going up throughout the Denver metro area, and Littleton is certainly not alone. What is the reason for all of these apartments?
I'll start and then Mark can finish. A couple different things that are going on. The demographics of our city are changing, and therefore the preferences in types of housing is changing. Also, there is a land cost involved in any type of housing. So when developers are looking at their costs and building, that plays a large role in that. I think in terms of the demographics, again, people's opinions are changing and they want different types of housing than we currently offer. And you're seeing it all across the Denver metro area.
just as this stops by, what's really interesting is as you think about the number of apartments that have popped up from almost a state perspective or even a Front Range perspective, the emphasis after the recession was to bring jobs to Colorado. And there was a huge push to get those jobs here in the state. And the first thing that those jobs need are people. And, the Front Range in particular, the metro area, really took a time out in terms of providing those housing units for those new people that were arriving here. And in many ways, we're still playing catch up. And so it really is that at this moment in time, it feels like, wow, there's a lot happening, but there was such a demand and such a gap in providing those types of housing choices that it is still a game of catch up in many ways.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting issue because from my perspective, this is one of the reasons why I feel so adamant that this community really needs to go through kind of a visioning process and a comprehensive planning process so that we get to decide where is it that we want growth and to what kind, to what density, what is it going to look like. I think our history has been since we haven't had a really updated comp plan, is that we've had kind of these one-off projects that come from the development community, and there hasn't really been a lot of guidance by the city to tell the development community what it is we really want. And so we've seen these projects kind of scattered around looking at individual rezones and the like. And I think that's frustrating. It's frustrating for an organization, for a community, and I think that this is an attempt, in my opinion, for us to be much more focused about that so we can tell the development community, this is where we want growth, this is what the density that we want, and this is what we want it to look like. And so, in my opinion, this is probably one of the most important reasons why we are doing this comp plan.
How do these plans support keeping more jobs in our community?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the major components of a comprehensive plan is really kind of understanding the role of economic development, the local economy, our tax base. And so many of the goals and policies that have been outlined in that particular section really do emphasize the need for us to understand how jobs play a role in the next 20 years here in the city and understand some of the big components that make the city financially sustainable. I think part of the work that will be in the next coming weeks, the next joint leadership session of our City Council and Planning Commission will be on September 10th. One of the key components of that will be the fiscal impact analysis. So really understanding the costs of working towards this vision for over the next 20 years, if there are any financial gaps, but also the incredible role that businesses have in terms of locating jobs here in the community, and also what that mix of different land use types, is it more retail, is it more restaurants, is it different kinds of residential or housing types, and really kind of understand how those things all fit together. So it is, in many ways, the economic development piece kind of becomes the linchpin. The first thing that economic development needs is great infrastructure. And so the Transportation Master Plan, the fact that we're doing this at the same time becomes so important to not only making a case for why you would want to do business here in Littleton, but also laying forward that path of how your business looks today, but also how you can imagine your business 20 years from now thriving in our city.
Yeah, I think, Kathleen, I think what I would add is we had a polling question, earlier in the evening here, we were talking about, 92% of the jobs that we have here are provided by people outside of our community. That to me is a rather startling number. I was not expecting to see that. And, we pay a price for that, the obvious congestion with people coming in and out of our community. So the transportation piece of this thing is maybe an obvious one. I think it's one of those elements that I hope we hang on the mobile, as I was talking about earlier, that we really do flesh out the strategy of economic development so that we do provide more opportunities for our residents to live and to work in our community.
How do these plans affect the city's budget?
Well, Well, Kathleen just touched on it. One of the pieces we're going to be talking with the Planning Commission and the City Council here in a couple of weeks is kind of this economic analysis. And so this is kind of, in my view, there's kind of three real basic pieces of this comp plan effort. One is the future land use map. This is kind of how we kind of envision growth here in the long run. What does that look like for the next 20 years? Where do we want that? What's the character? The other piece of this, of course, is the transportation and how it links all together here. This third piece, this economic analysis, is kind of where we're trying to decide, well, can we afford it? How does that look financially? I think, too, we've had some conversation with the City Council that one of the pieces that we really want to kind of flesh out in more detail is kind of an economic model. And so that when we do have development that comes to the city, that we have a way to analyze that and kind of bring the data back into our comp plan, bring that data back into the transportation plan to kind of reassess to make sure it kind of fits the ultimate goals and priorities that we've established. So, for example, I think, it's pretty well known that single-family residential is, for a city, is really a cost. And so with a city like ours, we're heavily reliant upon sales tax. We obviously don't get a lot of sales tax from single-family homes. On the other end, if we do have kind of heavy commercial or big box kind of retail, then sure, the city tends to have much more sales tax. And so I think there's been kind of this lack of data, lack of information, a lack of a model, where development, when it comes to the city, we'd like to be able to analyze that. And I think in the future, we're likely to see a lot of mixed use, where we have kind of commercial, residential, office kind of blended into some future developments. We've seen all sorts of examples across the whole metro area for this kind of development. And so again, I think we're going to have a discussion about the economic analysis and how it kind of fits our city here in the long run.
Can I add something? What's really interesting about this process when we kicked it off last year is the incredible desire on the part of our council really wanting to be very values-based in terms of decision making and have those data points to really make good decisions. And I think that where we're finding success is where you can be really clear about the vision, which we adopted last year, where you can start to think holistically across all of our departments. I mean, some wonky people might call that systems thinking. And then you can kind of put that together, those two things, and then start aligning the resources. So really setting priorities and making sure that the budget really communicates how those dollars get invested and where those priorities lie. And so I think their commitment to being very values-based, the process we went through last year to really define what those shared values are, starting to plug those in, and then really thinking about how the data that we learn both from what we found on the ground in terms of existing conditions, but also in terms of this fiscal impact model that we run, the data that comes out from that, even in terms of transportation, a travel demand model. What are the demands going to be on our system? How do you put all of those data points together to really drive towards good decisions?
Okay, we've got a couple of online questions. I'm going to go to Chuck first. Chuck says, is it accurate the proposed rezone for the Enser property will be considered by City Council before the comp plan is approved? I guess that's part A. And part B is, does it seem more appropriate for this proposed major development to be considered by the new council that takes over in November? And Jennifer, maybe explain where the Enser property is.
Correct. So the property located on the southwest corner of Mineral and Santa Fe has historically been referred to as the Enser property. The Enser family owned this for decades. It has been purchased, as Keith said, actually, one of the parcels has been purchased and is in the city right now with a development application. That development application, a notice has been sent out to go to Planning Commission on September 9th. And right now is tentatively scheduled for council public hearing on the 1st of October. And again, this is balancing property owner rights and due process, and this is where they are in the process right now. So yes, it will be most likely considered by council prior to the adoption of the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, perhaps one other kind of distinction to make here is that the owner of the property, who is a development company, submitted the application purposely before the adoption of our current comp plan. They have, and for all the reasons that, largely known to them, but so they have the legal right to kind of pursue that and to come within the existing comprehensive plan. That's not necessarily our preference, but they have the legal right to make that application. So again, as Jennifer was talking about, the Planning Commission will hear that and then ultimately forward that on to a recommendation to our City Council. At that point, it's hard to say kind of where that project may go. I won't speculate at this point. There's no point in that, but I appreciate kind of the question that the caller was kind of raising there.
Okay, thank you. Deb has several, mostly comments, but her question is about Santa Fe and Mineral, and she asks, did CDOT originally have a plan for Santa Fe to go over Mineral and scrapped it because of the cost? Maybe CDOT needs to be involved.
CDOT is involved. It is their road. It's not our road. So they will always be involved. We can't go out there and build anything without their permission. So that's the first part. In the past, there's really never been any extensive planning prior to the last couple of years about what an interchange would look like at that location. We really pushed forward the last couple of years from our own perspective to partner with CDOT and Arapahoe County and Douglas County to develop some designs conceptually out there that would allow us to pursue funding to potentially put in improvements. Why did we bring those other partners in? Arapahoe County is going to be a big player. They may be a financial participant. Douglas County also is important because just to the south of us, there's 20,000 new homes going in south of that area. So that's why they have to be part of the discussion. So there's no plans that have ever really been scrapped because there's been any projects really proposed. So it's an exciting time for us to actually talk about the future of that, and tied into the study we've been talking about is really a great chance for us to see where that priority of this improvement falls versus the other priorities in the corridor from CDOT's perspective especially.
We're going to ask our final poll question for the evening as our time is beginning to wind down. We've got about 15 minutes to go, and I would encourage anybody listening on the phone, if you have a question, now's the time. Press *3 on your phone so that we can find out what's on your mind. Let's go to our final poll question. We know that Littleton residents love their parks, trails, and open space. But how do you think we stack up compared to other cities? For every 1,000 people in Littleton, how many acres of parks and open space do we enjoy? Press 1 if you think the answer is 9.2 acres. Press 2 if you think we have 9.6 acres per 1,000 people. Press 3 if you think we have 22 acres, or press 4 if you think there are 31 acres of parks and open space for every 1,000 people. So go ahead and cast your votes. All right, it looks like most people think that 22 acres per 1,000 people is the correct answer. Actually, the correct answer is number 4. Littleton has 31 acres of parks and open space per 1,000 people, and that is more than triple the Colorado and the national average. So we have a long legacy of protecting parks and open space in Littleton. So let's go to the question, how do we keep the open space that we have?
We do a couple of things. First of all, anything that's ever been purchased as open space with open space tax dollars cannot be sold or disposed of without a vote of the citizens of Littleton. So if it's open space now, the only way it's not open space is if the community votes to do that. On a ballot in the fall. The other part of that is that we, on an annual basis, we get about $1 million a year to support our open space programs from the Arapahoe County open space tax. We get a small amount of money, about $100,000 from Jefferson County's open space tax, because we have a little corner of them down there. And we do that in partnership with South Suburban Parks and Rec District. They actually manage most of our parks. We manage some open spaces ourselves, but we've preserved a lot. We continue to look at opportunities as they arise to potentially expand that portfolio. But it's not, if it's here, it's not going away unless the citizens say, yes, sell it.
And can I just add, it's interesting when you look at future land use for the next 20 years, 75% of that is complete with two things: parks and open space and residential parts of our city. Parks and open space being 30% and residential being 45%. So 75% of what we see for the future is much of the things that people really, really value.
There's talk of a mixed-use corridor along Santa Fe Drive. How does that affect the South Platte River?
The mixed-use corridor character that has been identified in the future land use map and in the comprehensive plan is in a couple different places, one of them being Santa Fe, one of them being Littleton Boulevard, and some along Broadway. Santa Fe corridor and the South Platte River are one and the same to us in terms of the mixed use along the Santa Fe corridor. It is very important that anything that goes in there in the future and what there is currently both addresses the Santa Fe corridor as well as the river corridor. The river is a huge part of Littleton and what makes us the unique community that we are. So anything, again, that happens with that, the river will be a huge part of that decision.
Yeah, and I think I would just add in the short term, if you think about some of the great wins along that corridor, something like a Breckenridge Brewery, that obviously Santa Fe is, sort of the lifeblood of how you get there, but the orientation of how they have built that place, everything is about embracing and orienting towards that river and that incredible river experience. And so it's really how you start to think about how you can kind of combine those two things, both the access, but the incredible gem that the river is, and really not only engage with it and enjoy it, but also respect it.
Yeah, I think the piece I'd add to that is, we commented on this maybe a little earlier, but this caller raises a question for which our city council was really deeply concerned about. And so that's why we spent a little extra time kind of going through this corridor to kind of make sure that we have a plan that does reflect the sensitivity that we have towards the river. So and the other thing too, maybe I'd comment on, our history here along that river is quite fascinating. I had an opportunity here a little over a year ago to meet with, some city managers here who currently still live in our city, who have been here since the 60s. And our legacy of how we've created that park is a remarkable story. And so I just would say certainly that our community recognizes that. And I think that that is a value that is strong in our city, and we are definitely going to be protecting that.
Can I just make another plug for our fourth and final speaker series? As part of that event on Thursday, September 12th, which again is from 6 to 8 p.m. at Arapahoe Community College in the Summit Room, we'll actually be showcasing some great photography, historical and otherwise, some of the planning elements that have occurred along the both the Santa Fe and river corridors through the years. And so we recognize how incredibly important those two things are to this community, and so that showcase will be part of that event as well.
We have a phone caller who would like to ask a question. Sandy is on the line from the Kettering Park neighborhood. Sandy, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, thank you. You haven't mentioned Division of Wildlife in terms of open space and managing wildlife, and we all know that the geese are staying behind and living in the parks and really sort of crowding out the use of playgrounds and people in some of the parks as they become unusable. Is there any plan to address this?
I'll take that. Not really the geese roundup guy, but we have a relationship, of course, with the Department of Wildlife, Denver. All of us in the Front Range are in the middle of the goose situation. Frankly, that's one of the changes that we've seen is that as the Front Range has grown, there's a lot more things that they like just to sit and eat. and they don't leave. And they're non-migratory anymore, but they are also protected under the, Migratory Waterfowl Act. So we've got this balance to strike. We certainly hear about it every day. Nobody wants to go to a park that has, goose droppings everywhere and those kind of things. It's an issue from a local as well as a state basis and on a national perspective that we need to take a look at from a regulatory standpoint, because right now as a local city, basically the only thing we can do is haze the geese occasionally, or put up fake coyotes, or have the dogs run them off, and that's about all we can do. So it's a real challenge for us, and we work in partnership with South Suburban Parks and Rec with their Gooseinator, for example, is one of the tactics we use. I know my dog really likes to get after them as well, but not supposed to. So those are the kind of things that we're trying to do. But this is an item that I think we need to take up at the state level, and our members of Congress also need to be taking a look at this particular issue, because it's very much regulated by federal regulation.
All right, we are getting very close to wrapping up. Can you briefly address how the plan addresses taking care of the Littleton Museum and the Bemis Library?
So one of the sections really addresses some of our incredible amenities here, the museum and library. So I can't tell you the number of times in community conversation over the last 18 months where people have not just completely gushed over these two amazing assets that we have here in our community. And they're both gathering places. If you think about the museum and the fantastic concert series that's every summer, I know I spent a lot of those Wednesday nights just, having some information there, having the maps there just to engage with the community that shows up for those. So the plans do have a series of goals that are related to both the museum and library. The other thing that we've done is both of those institutions here in the city have volunteer boards or appointed boards. And so we've met with both the library and museum board to say, it's amazing how people feel about these two things in our community, but sometimes it doesn't always come through. Did we capture the full conversation? Does it match up with what you hear about the museum and the library? And so I know they're in the process right now of reviewing particularly the comprehensive plan with great detail and making sure that where they see those goals and efforts for the future on a policy standpoint are addressed. I suspect that it will continue to be part of the action framework for the comprehensive plan, that strategic plans for both the museum and the library are somewhere in the next 3 to 5 years, so that we make sure we understand from a facility standpoint what those needs are, but also in terms of a programming standpoint and just how you keep making those better and better and meeting the incredible high expectations of our citizens and visitors.
All right, everybody, we're about out of time. Mark, do you have a few closing comments for us?
Well, once again, this is our third time kind of using this technology, and I'm impressed once again. I don't know what the total numbers are, but I think the kinds of questions that we've received here this evening are pretty enlightening, and I think pretty encouraging. It's the kinds of things that I hope our citizens would be asking and would be kind of supporting this kind of conversation and trying to address. So again, I'm a big advocate of what we're doing. I give kudos to our city council for their efforts in recognizing the importance of this. So starting with that vision and making sure that we clearly understand the best we can, what is it that the community really values here, and then moving that into kind of a policy discussion around planning and growth and transportation and economic development. That's kind of the next step. So hopefully here, Council and Planning Commission will be considering this later this fall. If they do, Council ultimately passes all this, then we are looking at a much more engaged process once again when we talk about the next phase, which is really the development of the codes and how we ultimately, by regulation, kind of implement a lot of that policy. So again, I just want to thank everybody for kind of tuning in this evening. I truly hope that you enjoyed this. Again, I did, at least. And thank you very much.
And if you haven't already, the public comment period is open until September 16th at 5 p.m. You can visit envisionlittleton.org to share your thoughts. We'll be replaying this program on Channel 8 and on our website in a couple of days. So tell your friends and neighbors in case they missed it. We really appreciate your time tonight, and thank you very much for joining us. Good night.